Bolivia stands at a breaking point. Voters head to the polls in a fierce runoff that ends 2 decades of socialist rule. Fuel shortages, soaring inflation, and a collapsing currency fuel anger. Paz and Quiroga promise change. But only one can rescue a nation suffocating under crisis. The stakes couldn't be higher. Bolivia holds a runoff presidential election on October 19th, with the race in a dead heat as voters decide which conservative and capitalist candidate can better address the country's economic crisis after almost 2 decades of rule by the Movement Towards Socialism party. The winner will be inaugurated on November 8th. This election is seen as the country's shift from left to right, as the Andean nation has been crippled by a shortage of US dollars that has locked Bolivians out of their own savings and hampered imports. The value of a boliviano on the black market is half the official exchange rate. Year-on-year inflation soared to 23% last month, the highest rate since 1991, while fuel shortages paralyzed the country.
I've been here in the gas line for 12 hours. I started at 10:30 last night. This problem started about 8 months ago, maybe a little more. The issue is that it's becoming normalized. People are no longer complaining about it. What's happening with people is very subdued. Things have calmed down a lot.
Whoever wins the runoff, the new presidential term will mark the end of the rule of Movement Towards Socialism, or MAS, which has governed almost continuously since 2005. MAS was founded by former President Evo Morales, an icon of the Latin American left who once enjoyed massive support from Bolivia's indigenous majority and was the country's first ever indigenous chief.
The truth is that the current populist left-wing policy we've seen in Bolivia over the last 20 years, well, we had one transitional government, but it was useless. I really think people need to see that this can't go on, right? The public spending we've had over the last 20 years, how the money has been misused because we haven't invested in anything productive, just spent it, maintained people, not made it productive, just given out bonuses for no reason, that has really sunk the country.
The runoff pits centrist Senator Rodrigo Paz against conservative former President Jorge Tuto Quiroga. Both candidates aim to roll back elements of the MAS era state-led model, but differ drastically. Both have also pledged to improve ties with Washington after nearly 2 decades under socialist governments that aligned more closely with Russia, China, and Iran.
If one of the incoming governments, whether it's Rodrigo Paz or Tuto Quiroga, doesn't manage the economic system well and solve the diesel and gasoline issue quickly, I think they'll end up being a transitional government because the people themselves will rise up and start protesting if this fuel issue isn't resolved as soon as possible.
Quiroga and Paz have vowed to end Bolivia's fixed exchange rate, restructure state-owned companies, and attract foreign investment. Among the factors that most distinguish them is how far and fast they propose pushing their reforms.
China is the main buyer of raw materials, and I want investments and trade agreements with all countries, including China and also Korea and Japan. And I want cooperation programs with basic rules. I'm not a fan of bilateral loans tied to cooperation, where the supplier company comes from that country. Those projects generally have a very bad outcome.
Rodrigo Paz was the surprise victor in the first round of voting in August, despite registering less than 10% in early polling. He carried more than 32% of the votes in the August 17th general election. Quiroga came in second place with nearly 27% of the vote. Neither met the threshold to win the presidency outright, which would have required winning 50% of the vote or 40% with a 10-point margin over the nearest competitor. His moderate platform has resonated with voters disillusioned by the ruling Movement to Socialism party founded by Evo Morales, which suffered its worst electoral defeat in a generation amid a deepening economic crisis. However, critics argue that his promises may be difficult to deliver given Bolivia's fiscal challenges.
The fuel issue will be resolved from the start. We have already spoken with companies and institutions that will collaborate with us so that from November 8 or 9, when we take office, if that is the will of the people, we already have that resolved. We have made arrangements. You don't have to go to the International Monetary Fund to ask for dollars, which takes a long time.
Paz is a senator and the son of the former left-wing president Jaime Zamora. Though he has aligned himself with various parties throughout his career, in this election, he is representing the center-right Christian Democratic Party. Paz has pitched himself as a more moderate voice who will embrace pro-market policies while taking a cautious approach to austerity measures. Capitalism for all is his campaign slogan. His running mate is Edmund Lara, an evangelical Christian and former police officer who resigned from his position and became a popular figure on social media for his outspoken criticism of corruption. Jorge Tuto Quiroga is a businessman and former president. Early in his career, he worked in Texas for the multinational tech company IBM. But his interests shifted to politics, particularly in the 1990s, and he even worked under Paz's father as Bolivia's finance minister. In 1997, Quiroga ran as the running mate on the successful presidential ticket of Hugo Banzer, who led a military dictatorship in the 1970s. But when Banzer was diagnosed with cancer and resigned in 2001, Quiroga succeeded him as president, serving the remainder of his term. Quiroga's subsequent bids for the presidency have fallen short. He lost in 2005, 2014 and 2020. Polling currently shows Quiroga with a slight advantage, but analysts have pointed out that polling before the first round of voting failed to detect support for Paz. A poll taken between October 1st and 6th by the research firm CB Consultora found that Paz has an approval rating of 42.5%. Quiroga leads with 56.7% approval.